How did we get to polyphony? Polyphony tradition was a major turning point in Western music. It was developed from chant in the 10th through the 14th century along with notation, which helped people remember the increasingly complex and ornamented structure of the music. In the 11th century, Hildegard of Bingen came along and was given as a gift to the church, which indeed she was. She wasn't an ordinary woman at all. In fact, she composed more surviving chants than anyone else in the medieval time because of notation, including the Ordo Virtutum, which was the earliest surviving music drama not attached to the liturgical drama. As a part of the Benedictine tradition, she was given a great music education. She gave voice to the women of the church through writing and composing music. Most of her songs praised the Virgin Mary, the Trinity, or local saints. She composed her works mostly for office services, from syllabic hymns to highly melismatic responsories. Meanwhile, outside of the church, most everything was passed down orally, so it wasn't preserved besides a few monophonic songs, poems with lost melodies, and a few dance tunes. What we know about music from this time is that it was used for storytelling, enjoyment, supporting the arts and education, and prestige in the courts. The secular music from this time that was preserved is usually found in staffless neumes that cannot be transcribed unless the melody was written somewhere else in more precise notation. The neumes just floated above the words and provided melodic guidance, but because of the music's increasing complexity and the desire for a better way to pass it down, notation slowly began to develop. The songs of traveling troubadours and trouvères were the beginning of Western vernacular poetry. They wrote love songs, songs about political unrest, and moral and literary topics. Most of the songs were strophic, and dance songs often included a refrain. Their music was mostly syllabic, and any notation they used did not indicate rhythm. Most people in the Middle Ages sang and played music for their own enjoyment, but professional musicians also began to grow because of aristocratic sponsorship and the formation of guilds. This economy led to the commissioning of new music. Much of their music would have been songs written as unaccompanied melodies, but performance shows that they would have had instruments accompanying as well.
The songs that were mentioned above were written as a single-line notation, but were probably accompanied by instruments such as the viol, hurdy-gurdy, flute, and pipe. Later, the portative organ and the positive organ came to be. They either played the melody or they just improvised. During Europe's economic growth, the church was also growing and prospering. From new monasteries to new orders to new church styles, the changes came to music as well. Now, instead of having just one melody line, the chant, they added a drone to it. It was sometimes sang or played. Organum was also a huge addition to the chant. Since the chants were known by heart, they did not need to be notated, but now the organal voice needed to be notated so others can remember it. That is where Guido of Arezzo came in handy. He added 2 more lines to the staff that were already used so that it would be easier to read and notate and learn music. He also invented what is called the Guidodian hand to help with sight reading. The Aquitanian polyphony merged in Aquitaine and was developed by French singers and composers. This polyphony included the setting of chants, solo parts, and responsorial chants. There were also 2 styles within the polyphony. The first one was the discant style. Both voices move at the same rate, and also there was the florid organum, which lower voice moves slower. And now, by having these 2 styles, composers could have variety in their works. As time went on, the French thought that they needed another style of polyphony, and they created one, which was named the Notre Dame polyphony. And since the Notre Dame Cathedral was so big and impressive, the music had to match up to that. And now, for the first time, music was written for more than 2 independent voices. This music was valued among the people because of its artistic style. And now, in order to remember the rhythms of the written songs, people invented the rhythmic modes that were written at Notre Dame, which were the combination of note groups called ligatures. It consisted of short and long notes to help with reading of music. They were written for either 3/8 or 6/8 meters because they thought that 3 was a perfect number.
Notation gave a huge gateway into the preservation of music. Because of this, the music in Notre Dame was able to enter other areas across Europe. It also gave performers the ability to memorize and learn pieces much quicker than before. The Benedictine monks were key in producing more efficient ways of notating because of the work they did in copying by hand. Léonin and Peritin were the creators of polyphony in Notre Dame. Léonin created the Great Book of Polyphony, which was one of the first books of music to be written down. It was a collection of 2 voice settings of solo portions from chants like the graduals, alleluias, and office responsories for major feasts of the church year. This was used until Peritin edited it and is attributed to the descant that is better than Léonin created previously. Motets were a new genre that added Latin words to the upper voices of discant clausulae. It had complex patterns and multiple layers of meaning, which was highly valued. Because of this, it became the most popular polyphonic genre for both sacred and secular music. Since the typical early motet had 2 voices with 2 different texts, they had a compound title that had the first words of each voice. Franconian notation was created by Franco of Cologne, which was in his book, The Art of Measurable Music. Relative durations were signified by note shapes for the first time. This allowed for composers to have more rhythmic freedom and variety. Because of this, new styles of motets were created, and composers were able to express pieces distinct from each other. As distinctive features were becoming more popular, English polyphony began and had extensions of the continental practice. They used imperfect consonances, which were usually in parallel motion. Harmonic thirds and sixths had been allowed previously, but were much more common in English polyphony. They focused on sacred Latin texts and primarily used homorhythmic style. Complex polyphony continued to develop and was a turning point in Western music. Coordination of multiple parts, counterpoint and harmony used to create direction, tension, and resolution became significant characteristics of Western tradition that allowed for it to be set apart from almost all the others. Without notation, polyphony would not have survived. In the 18th and 19th centuries, it was looked at as crude and harsh. The late 19th and 20th centuries found polyphony to be exotic, but more people were listening and becoming accustomed to the sounds. Continuing into the 20th century, polyphony had a revival, where its differences were looked upon as strengths. Polyphony has continued to have a position in modern music where it is valued for its unique sounds.